So this Dharma talk is about restlessness and worry. And I actually ended up writing this talk in a roundabout way because I was actually writing another talk. And as I spent time on it, I realised that I was becoming quite restless and agitated. And for a while, I distracted myself from the restlessness with other things. I went and checked emails, and I went out to the garden and did some weeding. And I pressed on with the talk for a while, and it kept coming up, this restlessness, until I actually caught my resistance to it. So I actually turned to meet what was really here, what was present. What was present was the restlessness and worry. And so I completely, I threw out the old talk and I started this one. So this is the talk about the hindrance of restlessness and worry. And I was reflecting on how it becomes crucial to our further progress on the path that we learn to deal skillfully with these elements of experience that obstruct our progress, called the hindrances. And I think this is really central to our relationship, to how we deal with the hindrances is really central to this ongoing progress on the path, I think, because they can plague us in so many subtle ways that we don't really see anymore, because they're with us so often. And this is dealing with the hindrances is the first element for contemplation in the fourth foundation of mindfulness in the Satipatthana Sutta which is the practice that we do in this tradition. And this is then followed by the cultivation of the awakening factors. So we work first with what is obstructing our progress. And once we've worked with these obstructions, then we can work with the awakening factors, which are, we might say, the more positive factors of mindfulness, investigation, joy, energy, calm, concentration, and equipoise. So in the third foundation of mindfulness, which is about mind states, we actually become familiar with the mind states themselves. So we tune into, what is this thinking that keeps coming up? And what are the feelings, the emotions that we experience? And then in the fourth foundation, which I'll be talking about this evening, we're actually working primarily with the causes and conditions of these mind states. So we're delving more deeply into these mind states and working out what's fueling them, what's feeding them. So this is a really active exploration of what leads to the arising of the hindrances and how to overcome them. So the 5 hindrances, as many of you probably know, are sensual desire, aversion, sloth and torpor, which is the third one, restlessness and worry, and doubt. And this is a skeptical or paralysing doubt. And these are elements of experience that when we're not mindful of them, they block the settling of the mind and prevent the opening of our hearts. And this then prevents our progress on the path, because they actually lead to contraction and tightening in the body and mind. And they also build a self-fabrication through identification with aspects of our experience, with what we consider to be me and mine. So we then separate ourselves from the world. We create me and an other through this, through getting caught up in the hindrances. And it's crucial that we work with them, because once we've developed skillful strategies to be with them and to help counteract them, they actually lose their power over us. And this is when we can then move on to developing and really cultivating and blossoming the awakening factors. So there's a 5-part scheme that the Buddha outlined in the Satipatthana Sutta for dealing with for working with the hindrances. So it's know when it's present, know when it's absent, know what leads to its arising, know how it's removed, and then knowing what prevents it in the future. So I'm going to go through these one by one to sort of unpack this exploration of restlessness and worry. And sometimes restlessness and worry is translated as restlessness and remorse. So there's quite an element of regret and remorse sort of linked in with the worry part. And sometimes I've seen one translation of it as worry and flurry, which I thought was interesting. I don't really like it, but it's kind of sums it up in a way, I suppose, worry and flurry. So knowing when restlessness and worry is present, I think this is really synonymous with the first noble truth of meeting and fully knowing what's here. And if we notice that restlessness and worry is present, how do we know it? What does it feel like in the body and mind? Again, we turn to what's actually here in the body. As uncomfortable as restlessness and worry is, as I discovered a few days ago, by really tuning into it. How do we know what gives us the knowledge that it's here? So there's a beautiful simile of a bowl of water in the Buddhist teachings that says when the mind is clear from disturbance, from these hindrances, we can say it is like crystal clear water in a bowl in which we can clearly see reflected our face. And we can see and know our own face when we look into that crystal clear bowl of water. We can say, yes, that's my face reflected there. When restlessness and worry is present, though, the simile likens this to the water ruffled by the wind, so that the water trembles, eddies, and ripples. So this is you can imagine a lot of movement on the surface of the water that doesn't actually lead anywhere. So in this state, if we were to look at our reflection in that bowl, we wouldn't see our face clearly. It'd be distorted, and we wouldn't necessarily know it was our face because we wouldn't be able to see it clearly. So I really like this simile because I think it's just a really clear indication of what's happening with restlessness and worry in our system. So when we feel these things, these hindrances of restlessness and worry, the body can feel agitated, jumpy. Sometimes it feels like we're, that term, that phrase, jumping out of our skin is really apt here. We can feel over-adrenalized and sometimes even kind of like outside of ourselves, like we're lifting out of our bodies. And similarly, a restless mind, like mine was last week writing the Dharma talk, can be agitated, jumpy, with thoughts moving around at a rapid rate, scattered all over the place. We're probably all really familiar with this. So it's sort of a trembling with activity. And I found a lovely short poem by the writer Anais Nin, which describes this sort of sense of adrenalized tension really well. It just says, I'm restless. Things are calling me away. My hair is being pulled by the stars again. I thought it was such a potent, my hair is being pulled by the stars again. It's kind of like, there's such agitation in that statement. And I think it's particularly alive, this kind of energy for many of us at the moment with the myriad issues relating to the pandemic. But even apart from COVID-19, our modern, Western culture, I think has a penchant for restlessness and worry. Our obsession with being busy, things calling us away, as Anais Nin said in her poem, and this sort of sense of things moving faster and faster. There's an intensity, I think, to the restlessness, this restless rush towards something, anything other than what's here right now, yeah? And we seem to have greater and greater expectations attached to our actions. And worry can manifest in the mind as regret or remorse about getting something done, or maybe something that we haven't done in the past, yeah? So this is sort of the slightly, so it's more the worry side of the restlessness and worry. It can be anxiety about a future occurrence, or of an anticipated occurrence or anticipated problems. So, yeah, the worry can come in this sort of anxious kind of feeling. And worry comes up with this obsessive thinking that many of us deal with. And if you're someone who wakes in the night, you know, sometimes it feels like the worrying gets so large, it looms over us in the darkness, and then you wake up in the morning thinking, what was all that about? Yeah? So this is the hindrance of restlessness and worry as it manifests in the body and the mind. Oh, and I think, yeah, the inner critic also finds a home here in this hindrance. You know, when the judge, the perfectionist, the comparing mind, the controller, all these aspects of the inner critic that Western psychology defines, really comes alive in this hindrance. So knowing when restlessness and worry is not present, what does it feel like when these aren't actually coursing through our veins and through our minds? And again, the bowl of water simile is that of the mind, of the wind stopping, the ripples and the turbulence settling down. And this means that we can then see things clearly as they are again. So the water in the bowl becomes crystal clear, and then we can see our reflection clearly. So with this settling, things open up so that the contraction leaves and we can expand awareness out again, just as we did in the meditation, expanding awareness out and taking in more of our experience. And then the manifestation of this calm and this ease in the body is, as you can guess, it's the breathing slows down. There's a sense of, there's not that jumpiness that's there when we're restless. We feel more grounded. We might, our energy might settle down deeper into the body, into the feet, or into the lower part of the body. And we feel lighter and more spacious. And then in the heart and the mind, there's more clarity in the mind. There's a sense of objectivity, of distance from what we're experiencing. We can step back a little and not feel so caught up and enmeshed in what's actually going on at any point in time. So there might be more of a sense of a joyful presence in the moment with what's happening, and more of a settled, that present moment awareness is more likely to, we're more likely to inhabit that when restlessness and worry isn't with us. So I think it's really important to know and to become familiar with how the absence of restlessness and worry feels in the body, because then we can actually cultivate this, and we can also then more quickly recognize when restlessness and worry is with us. Yeah. So we need to know both sides of the presence and absence in order to really know it. Again, going back to the first noble truth of to fully know our suffering is to also to know when we're not suffering, yeah? Which also picks up on the third noble truth. So knowing what leads to restlessness and worry arising. This is the step that corresponds to the second noble truth of seeing the causes and conditions of our suffering. And this is where we can really start to loosen the grip the hindrances have on us. And having said that, simply meeting restlessness and worry in any moment also tends to shift it, you know. So just recognizing it and saying, yeah, you again, restlessness and worry, again, sometimes. You know, that in itself clarifies and gives us much more space than was there before we, you know, when we're all caught up in it. So it changes the view of our experience already before we've even delved into what's leading to the arising. So this step, knowing what leads to its arising, is about looking at our relationship with it. So in my example, I was pushing through and asking, what's going on? Why isn't this talk working? Why isn't it coming together? I was actually getting caught up in my own agenda. So at this point, we can interpret the struggle as meaning that we're off track somehow, yeah? That things are going badly, they're not going our way, and that we're not the good meditator or the good person that we thought we were. And this is the key, I think, because this is where the hindrances are such great teachers. Because this is the actual fabric of our practice. And the fabric of deepening insight is when we can unpack and unravel these patterns. So how can we work skillfully with restlessness and worry? How can we meet it? You know, fully meet it without falling into habitual patterns of doing, staying busy, or distracting ourselves, as I did last week. I think there are two wise attitudes that can really help when working with the hindrances generally. One is to not take them personally, and two, the second one is to not believe their perspectives. So again, stepping back, giving ourselves a little space when we can. And this is not always possible. Sometimes we're actually enmeshed in this thing, we're caught up in it. So it might be that we come back and reflect on this at a later point, yeah, when we've got through the storm, and then we can sit down on our cushion and actually say, what happened? What happened in that storm? How did we get there? So by not taking the hindrance personally, I'm actually cutting through the message that I tell myself that I'm an unworthy meditator or an unworthy person because I'm feeling restless or worried. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with feeling restlessness and worry if we're not caught up in it. You know, if we're just letting it flow through as we let flow through any sensation through the body, any sound coming in, any thought moving through, without grasping at it or pushing it away, there's no problem. Restlessness and worry can be there. And not believing the hindrances perspective allows us to see more clearly the stories and the notions of me and mine and the world out there that the restlessness and worry really help construct. And this was my experience last week. Once I realised I was getting caught up in the concept of this, of continuing to write this particular Dharma talk, which wasn't working, I recognised the source of the resistance, of the restlessness. I was pushing my agenda, and as a result, everything was contracting and feeling scattered, so sort of shrinking in on one hand, and just completely scattered and all over the place on the other. So really uncomfortable, feelings. And the construction started with the seed of my talk, this idea of my talk, and then escalated as I watered that seed of I making and my making with more concepts and stories until it was like a vine kind of tangling me in its tendrils. So if we catch this proliferation, which I did, in service of these two attitudes of not believing the perspectives and not taking them personally, it's really helpful then at that point to ask, how did I get here? What brought me into this storm of restlessness and worry? Or another good question is, what's fueling this restlessness and worry? What's feeding it? Or what am I believing about myself right now? So we delve into the nature of the restlessness and worry, how it sort of got us caught up. And we do this with mindfulness, with curiosity. We might do it with playfulness and humour. It's always good to approach the hindrances with a bit of humour, I find, if we can manage it at the time. And we're doing this in order to see the pattern of reactions and fabrication that's kind of built up and sort of constructed this sense of me and mine in that moment. And we need to do this gently because it takes time and compassion to unpack, these constructions, these fabrications that we build over and over, a lot of the time without even seeing them. And this is the essence, the nub of our practice. This is why we sit in formal meditation, to develop this composure, this stillness of body and mind, so that we can then turn to meet these storms when they arrive. And it's when we can see the form of the fabrications, how this construction has come together, that we then have the clarity to know how to dismantle them. And this is part of the next steps, which is the fourth and fifth steps of knowing how restlessness and worry is removed. So how do we find relief from this hindrance of restlessness and worry? When we're all caught up and we need some perspective, what strategies will help? What tools can we turn to? So first of all, as I mentioned, this attitude of not taking it personally and not getting caught up in the perspectives of the views of the hindrance is probably the most important thing, because that can bring immediately some clarity and some space. And then traditionally in the teachings, quietude and calm are the traditional antidotes of restlessness and worry. As are the awakening factors of concentration and equipoise. To bring these about, we might focus on the breathing. Again, the breathing is such a powerful tool if it's somewhere that's comfortable for us to go. And really focusing on the out-breath in particular, lengthening the exhalation and emphasizing relaxing and letting go. Restlessness and worry is all about this sort of tight, adrenalized agitation. So it's all about softening and loosening that. Or we can bring attention to the simple joy of being in the present moment with each breath, or even just feeling our feet against the ground. And again, in particular, the present moment awareness of the whole body. And as I just said, remembering that the hindrance of restlessness and worry tends to contract the body awareness. Actually, all the hindrances do. They contract our body awareness down to these tight and narrow views of ourselves and the world. So expanding our awareness out to include the whole body and beyond, opening the senses, opening the hearing and just letting the sound of the wind come in, really helps counteract the tendency of contraction. And so anything that settles the mind and grounds us in the body is generally really helpful here. So walking, going out for a walk if we're getting tight with something and all caught up. Walking, or going and sitting in nature, leaning against a tree, or some gentle movement. Get out your yoga mat and just be in the body. Let everything settle down and focus on the out breath again. Or whatever sort of movement, or maybe qigong or tai chi, or whatever helps to sort of shift this restlessness in the body and grounds us against the earth again. So I just want to mention the matter of right effort here, because it's particularly relevant here with restlessness and worry. And there's a lovely simile in the teachings of a lute. And the Buddha is speaking with a lute player. It's called a veena in the teachings. And he's asking the player of the lute about his effort in his practice. And he likens effort in our practice to the tuning of a lute or a veena. And it describes the strings on a lute as either being tuned too tightly, and this is where we're putting in too much effort, likened to being, we're putting in too much effort. So it makes it impossible to play the veena when the strings are too tight, yeah? And on the other hand, if the strings of the veena are tuned too loosely, it's also impossible to play, or it's impossible to get a harmonious sound from it. And this is similar with the mind, which should be neither too tight nor too loose. We need to expend effort in our practice, of course, of training the mind. But if we push too hard, practice becomes brittle and strained and tight, just like a too tightly tuned veena. So the instruction here is to back off and bring some playfulness and relaxation again into the practice, and this will soften things and bring release to the body and mind. So we can see that this step corresponds to the third noble truth of knowing, really knowing in our being, the experience of letting go of reactivity, experiencing the freedom that flows through our being when we're not all caught up, when we've let go of this restless and worry, spaciousness occurs. The self-fabrication falls away, and there's a release in the body and the heart and the mind. So then, preventing restlessness and worry from arising in the future. This corresponds to the fourth noble truth of the Noble Eightfold Path, which many of you have learned about and know about. It's living and acting skillfully and wisely, moment to moment. And just two points here, really, to finish. Keeping the ethical basis of our practice in mind, I think, is really powerful here. Reflecting on our commitment to the Dharma and our intentions for practicing, or our motivations for practicing, for non-harming, for peace, for liberation of all beings. Whatever our heartfelt and altruistic motivations are for practicing, if we bring those to mind, they can help loosen whatever is here, especially with the hindrances. And it quickly helps dissolve any residue of remorse and agitation, and really lights up the heart with ease and joy. And we can also reflect on the ever-changing impersonal nature of the flow of experience, and really appreciate the interdependent nature of it all, reminding ourselves that nothing stands still, nothing stands alone. We're all connected in this vast mystery of it all, yeah? And not one iota of it actually belongs to me or mine. We can't call anything we experience me or mine, ultimately. And therefore it's not worth clinging to. It all flows on. Our practice is about meeting this and embracing it like a friend. Restlessness and worry and all. And I'd just like to read a poem to finish, as I want to do, which is by Ryokan, the Zen poet and Zen master. The wind has settled, the blossoms have fallen, birds sing, the mountains grow dark. This is the wondrous power of Buddhism. Let's sit for a moment together.